Hello, hello, everyone. Welcome to our sake tasting SipScout party.
Come by.
We are excited to have you all here.
I hope you haven't dipped into the sake yet. I know it must be tempting. At least it has been for us. It's been very hot here in Arizona, and a nice glass of chilled sake really can hit the spot.
Hit the spot. We're going to give people a couple of minutes to join. We have a few people joined right now, and we will get started.
As we're sitting down together, if you have your cute little ochoko glasses and the sake, which has hopefully been chilled, please bring those together, and your little sake sensory wheel will also be a handy reference while we're discussing these sakes. And your Sake 101 guide is a nice little reference too. It has some good glossary terms that we might be referring to with regard to some of the terminology that might be a little bit unfamiliar with respect to sake. Sake is a fun category that is not very well known here in the United States. And we're delighted to get to share an American produced sake today with Momokawa.
Which is very exciting. Yeah, there's not a lot of that going on here. And so we'll tell you a little bit about them. All right, I say we get started. We have a good number of people here, and let's get rocking and rolling here. Yep. For those of you who are new, thank you for joining us. I'm Suzanne. I'm the founder of the Crafty Cask, where we are all about celebrating and supporting craft alcohol makers like Momokawa that we'll be talking a little bit about today.
And my name is Evan Rothrock. I'm a certified sommelier, a certified cider professional, craft whiskey enthusiast.
Awesome mixologist.
Thank you.
I benefit from his mixology creations quite often, some of which do include sake. So we can talk a little bit about sake cocktails later in the evening as well. Yeah, so for those of you who have your kits, you should have all of these in front of you. Sake is something that when you open it, you're probably going to want to finish it, right? This isn't going to save.
Yeah, this has the shelf life that a beer or a wine has.
So you might be able to downsize it, put it in a smaller bottle, save it for a day, maybe.
Yeah,
if you put it in the fridge.
I agree. Yeah, something that is relatively low in alcohol, like sake is, or wine or beer, and something that is simply fermented as opposed to perhaps distilled, generally has the tendency to oxidize. And while it's not going to turn to vinegar, that's kind of a common misconception with regard to wine that sits on your shelf for a few days. It might not taste great anymore. It doesn't actually turn to vinegar, but it does oxidize. It loses the bright fruity and floral characteristics that oftentimes are appealing in it. Many of those characteristics are found in quality sakes like the ones that we're going to be enjoying today. So
if you don't plan on drinking all three, you can downsize them, put them in the fridge for a night or two. But
whatever size vessel that you have that minimizes the amount of headspace or air after you downsize it, that's optimal.
Yeah, and keeping it in the fridge, of course.
Yes.
And then if you are one of our SipScout members and you have your kit, grab your cute little ochokos as well. Aren't these adorable? We were so excited that we found someone on Etsy who could make little branded ochokos, which is the name of the cup that sake is traditionally enjoyed out of. And they often, they come in ceramic like these, but they often come in even like wood almost kind of materials and glass. And so different styles. But
yeah, there's actually a really fun kind of tradition in a lot of Japanese izakayas, gastropubs, where sake is actually served in a glass, but the glass is in a wooden masu or mokari is the Japanese term for it. And I think it's a really fun sentiment where they intentionally over pour into the glass and then it fills into the cup. And it's just a symbol of
overflowing kind of
hospitality and
wealth and health and all those good things.
Yeah, and commonly, you pick up the glass and the wooden box together and sip them. And then whatever's left in the wooden box, or after you finish the glass, you can either pour into the glass and continue to enjoy, or drink right out of the wooden box. And when I was in Japan, I had a really fun time just drinking right out of the box, just picking up the glass, pouring it into the box, and like cheersing with the box and drinking out of the box.
Not every day you get to cheers with the box, and it's culturally and socially acceptable, I
Yeah.
suppose. For those of you who are new here, you know, we typically, the first half hour, maybe 45 minutes, depending, is webinar style, as you are in right now. So we cannot see your faces, we cannot hear you, which we honestly kind of hate. But we've received feedback that it's nice to just be focused on the education and tasting up front. So we'll do that for about a half an hour probably. And then we will open it up where you can promote anyone who wants to be the panelist. We'll promote all of you to panelists at that time, but then you can decline it if you don't want to be panelists and still stay kind of incognito and just listen in. Or you can turn on your camera and turn on your mic, and we can have a little happy hour and get to talk to each other. But meanwhile, while we are in this webinar format, please feel free to use the chat. We love to hear your questions, your comments, your thoughts, all of that good stuff. So please use the chat heavily if you have anything to say. We definitely want to hear from you. We don't want to just hear ourselves talk, even though that's what we're going to do for the first 30 minutes. All right, let's crack into our first one. The first one we are going to enjoy is the diamond.
So all three of the sakes that we're going to be enjoying today are designated as what's known as Junmai Ginjo.
Yes.
And Junmai and Ginjo both refer to separate parts of designation within the regulatory body in in Japan, that talks about sake and how it is taxed and how it's enjoyed.
Kind of similar to how here in the States we have designations for bourbon versus whiskey and what legally has to be in place in order for you to be able to put that on your label. Kind of the same idea. Shall we do a little?
I guess we should say
Kanpai.
kanpai.
Kanpai is
Kanpai.
how you cheers in Japan.
Do itashimashite, Ojo-san.
I don't know what that means.
Something
Do you
that
know what that means?
it's something that I feel like I heard my mom say a lot.
Oh,
And it's something that I believe has no correlation to sake. I think it's something that her dad told her, which was roughly, thank you very much, honorable daughter. He spent some time in Japan in like the 50s. I'm not totally sure, but
it just
there it is.
is in your brain.
It just rolled out of my mouth.
Love it, love it. All right, so let's talk a little bit about that Junmai Ginjo, since all three of these are stylistically, that's what they are. So Junmai, whenever you see Junmai on anything, what that essentially means, so sake is made from, are you showing the sake?
I was pointing at Junmai over here on the wheel.
So sake is essentially made from 4 ingredients. The rice, sake rice, water, koji, which is an enzyme, and we can talk a little bit about that, and yeast. So those 4 ingredients have to be in sake in order for it to be sake. But there are times where people add other distilled spirits into it. Grain alcohol, essentially, is what you can think of it as. And one of the reasons that happens is for mass producers to stretch the sake and make it more affordable. So that's one reason. But if they only add a little bit of that grain alcohol, it can often enhance flavors, aromas, profiles, if just a little bit of it is added. If more of it's added, it starts to kind of be more about the cost than a flavor profile thing. So if you hear Junmai, what that means is it's only those 4 ingredients. There is no other distilled spirit add to this. So it's really the purest form of sake, those 4: rice, water, koji, and yeast. That's all that's going on in here whenever you see Junmai on a label. And then the Ginjo, want to explain the Ginjo?
So Ginjo and its associated term Daiginjo refer to what goes on with the rice prior to the fermentation process. So essentially, if you imagine a grain of rice, a single grain, the outside of this is mostly bran, fiber. And then there's a layer underneath that that's oils and proteins and fats. And then at
kind
the
of
heart,
a casing around the rice.
that's perfect. And then at the heart of it is starch. And so by slowly and carefully milling the grain, which is essentially what white rice that you purchase at the store to eat, as opposed to brown rice, white rice has maybe about 10% of the outer layer that's been milled off. So the bran fiber component is gone, but there is still some of the protein and fat elements that still exist. At the heart of that, past the 10% milling that you find in normal white rice, you get to really a pure amount of starch. And depending on the style of sake that you're trying to produce, the more milling that you do, the quote unquote higher quality of sake you're going to have as a result.
So closer to that center you're getting, really, if you think about, like, you know, when we were kids, Tootsie Pops, like getting to that center of the Tootsie Roll, like the more you kind of work away, the more you're getting to that kind of pure essence center. That's really the pure starch.
Do you remember those commercials?
How many licks does it take?
With
to
the
get to the
owl?
center of the Tootsie Roll Pop? Yes,
2,
yes,
3,
yes.
3.
But they are not licking away the outer layers of the rice grain. They are milling it. Yeah.
As a result, the type of rice that they use is generally a little bit different from the rice that you would generally use for eating. It's shorter grain because long grain, as you mill it, is going to break, and you don't want it to break. You want it to evenly be worn down, like you're tumbling, you know, geodes and stones. If there's any rock hounds in the crowd, and over time, you'll mill away the outer layer and be left with varying levels of milling. So for ginjo, at least 60% of the outer layer, at least 40% of the outer layer is removed, leaving 60% remaining. Dai ginjo, 50% remains. That's the highest level that they have designations for, but there are some very unique and rare sakes that are 1% remaining. It's kind of absurd that they would essentially remove so much of the outer layer, but they exist.
And if you think about that, they're buying rice and then getting rid of 99% of that rice to make their product and sell it to you. So you can see why that would be a more premium, more expensive sake, because there's a lot of waste in that process. But a lot of the waste, like, so the things that they mill off, there are other uses for them.
There are, and most producers of sake are pretty mindful of that. They're sustainable. What is milled off is used as gluten-free flour. It's used for feed on farms, various different sustainable purposes. It's even used to make paint. Kind of weird, like a thickening component for paint. And then there's one lower designation, Honjozu. Honjozu is.
Did you say the regular Junmai? So in order of quality, the top quality is the Junmai Daiginjo. The middle level of premium sake is Junmai Ginjo, which is what these kind of are, is that premium level, but kind of that mid-level premium. And then Junmai, without any other designation, just Junmai is kind of just those 4 pieces, but a little bit more of that rice grain is left on. So that's kind of the premium tier.
Right, up to 60% would be just Junmai, and then these are more than 60%, but less than 50. So Junmai Ginjo, and then more than 50 is Junmai Daiginjo.
And then if you take away the Junmai from those, so if you're just talking about Ginjo or Daiginjo, or like you were about to say, Honjozo,
yeah,
Futsu, those are the ones that have some other distilled spirit added into it. And so that's where, and it's a debate, honestly. Some people think, you know, oh, they're adding a different distilled spirit into it. It's not 100%, you know, the rice sake, therefore it's lower quality. But some people feel like if you're only adding a little bit of it to it, it actually can still be very premium because it is enhancing those flavor profiles. So it kind of depends how much of that distilled spirit they're adding into the final product. And I hate to break it to you, but adding distilled spirit to it, it does not make it higher proof. So they're not doing it to fortify it. They're not saying we're taking this and then adding more alcohol to it to fortify it. They're actually replacing some of this sake with that neutral grain, kind of distilled spirit, to just, like I said, stretch it or kind of enhance the flavor profile a little bit.
Yeah, and that's a notable point because to your point of the idea of quality being undermined by the addition of alcohol, there are numerous products in the wine world where
Sure.
the addition of alcohol,
Fortifies it.
such as port,
Yeah.
or sherry or Madeira, there can be very high quality examples of those, and adding alcohol to, a fermented wine doesn't necessarily negatively impact it quality wise, nor does it with regard to sake. It just changes it. And something that is probably kind of unique with sake compared to a lot of other fermented products is the temperature at which fermentation occurs.
That's true.
Very cold, and it's, as a result, very prolonged.
I think it takes like 32 to 48 days or something that's in fermentation. So it's a very long process.
Whereas beer or wine, standard fermentation takes about 10 to 15 days.
Right. So double or more.
And it's simply because it's being fermented very, very slowly. So there is an element of expediting the process and getting something to market a little bit quicker by fermenting it part of the way, maybe 10 to 15 days, and the alcohol percentage might reach 7 or 8, and then adding a little bit of distilled alcohol to get it to what is more standard for sake. I believe these are around 12, no, this one's almost 15%. Usually sake is roughly the same alcohol percentage as wine, somewhere in that 12 to 15% range. So the slow rate of fermentation is something that kind of necessitates the addition of distilled spirits at times. And as a result, while it doesn't necessarily mean the quality is lower, mass producers tend to utilize that a little bit more readily. So there's an association with that.
Y'all confused yet? Sake it's a little bit of like, I mean, every time, we love sake, we talk about sake, we do what we do for work, but even still, I feel like every time I go out to a Japanese restaurant and I'm looking at a sake menu, I'm pulling out one of my articles from the Crafty Cask or a cheat sheet to be like, wait, which is which and what is what and what do I want and what don't I want? Like we aren't exposed to it as much here in the United States. And note, we're not doing sake bombs tonight, because that is what, a lot of Americans think of when they hear sake, they think of sake bombs. And if you're not familiar with a sake bomb, good for you. But I'll explain what it is shortly. So a sake bomb is basically, it's usually relatively low quality sake. And you get a little cup of your sake, and then you get a beer, and you drop your sake cup in your beer, and then you drink them all at once in a very big gulp. And it's kind of like a cheers and tonight's going to be a party night kind of thing.
Yeah.
And they are delicious and they are fun if that's the kind of night you're having. But you don't need to have high quality sake to do that, certainly. And go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, I guess the perception of sake outside of sake bombs,
Hot sake.
what is generally served with sake bombs is hot sake, and that's generally, again, not harping on it too much. It is generally considered a lower quality sake, but it is a unique experience in and of itself. What we're enjoying today is a style of sake, Junmai Daigenjo, just Ginjo and Daigenjo, all of those kind of upper echelon, mostly because the amount of product that they have left to make sake out of compared to the other ones, it means that these are ones that are a little bit more refined. Actually, the material that you get when you're just using the starch in the very middle of the core of the rice grain lends to a little bit more of a floral, tropical, fruity type of flavor. Sake that's used or is made using a larger percentage of the grain of rice is no less enjoyable. It's just different.
A little less refined.
Sure, and in its rusticness, has a lot
There's
of
some
appeal.
beauty in that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Some people really love that.
Kind
and-
of tastes like a loaf of bread.
Yeah, and there are plenty of house sakes that I've had at restaurants that are probably lower quality, but are quite delicious. So-
Traditionally served a little bit warmer.
Yeah.
Traditionally served in, that's kind of an interesting point of note, is that they're traditionally served in ceramic,
Mhm.
whereas higher quality sakes are more often found in blown glass,
Mhm.
wine glasses even.
Yeah.
And there's the whole spectrum, and talking about it strictly in the idea of like quality, I think kind of does a disservice to the culture of sake as a whole.
Absolutely.
That's my 2 cents.
Yeah. And so in the interest of clearing up some confusion, because I know we're throwing a lot of words at you, I want to
Yeah,
share
let's
a
get the
visual.
terminology up there.
So I'm going to share this visual. See if this works here. That's good. Y'all seeing my screen? Looks like it.
Mhm.
All right, so let me move this over for us so we can see it because we're not seeing what you're seeing. There we go. All right. So this is something we created. We have three different articles on our website about sake. I'll throw them in the chat to kind of help educate here. But this is kind of what we were just talking about. So that, how did we say?
Say my BI.
Say my BI?
Say my BI.
Say my BI. That's how you say it. Say my BI is that really refers to, so it would be say my BI 70%, say my BI 60%, right? That's what the percentages are called, referred to. And so you can see here what we were talking about in this top row. This is really what's considered premium in that top row. So the Junmai Ginjo, the Junmai Daiginjo. The way that I like to remember it, so if I'm out at a restaurant and I'm trying to figure out, is it Daiginjo or Ginjo that's better, like which is the which, they go in alphabetical order from most premium to least. So Daiginjo D, Ginjo G, Junmai on its own, so that's kind of the order to think about those in. And then on your y-axis here, you have the percent of distilled alcohol added. So you can see for the premium ones, because they are all called Junmai, that means only those 4 things are in there. So that's why, none. There is no distilled alcohol added to those. And then you get into this middle tier here where 10% or less distilled alcohol is added. And that's where that debate lives, is in that middle row there of, are these lower quality? Are they still premium? And people have different opinions. I personally think, Evan agrees, that they are still premium when it has 10% or less of that distilled alcohol in there. And so then we have the final, the more than 10% is considered futsu.
And it kind of is as much of a quality as it sounds like.
Weird. Back, I see your chat. I'm not sure why that's happening, nor am I sure what to do about it. Let me just try to share again. Let's see. Is that better? Or maybe if I moved it? Maybe if I... Let me know if this is better or worse. Good, great. Okay. Yeah, I think this is a handy little visual here. And so the futsu is, that's where it's the more than 10% of distilled alcohol added. And I think it can be as high as 50%. I think that's the limitation, or do you think it can be higher?
I didn't realize that it could be that high.
It definitely can be that high. I definitely know I've read that, and it might be in one of our articles too, that it can be up to 50%. That is, and that's where you can see that's where mass makers are trying to kind of make it more cost effective for them. Adding 50% of neutral grain spirit to this more expensive process, right, it would save them a lot of money and allow them to offer a lower priced product as well. And so that's kind of futsu, that's where that is in there. And then it's also called futsu, you can see there, it's also called futsu if it has an unspecified say my buai.
Say my buoy.
Buoy.
I'm sorry, buoy. Yeah, no, buoy. You're right.
Yeah,
Buoy.
say my buai.
Say my buoy.
So if it's unspecified, so it might be, 80%, 90% is still there, where they're only taking a very little amount of that.
Because you're going to specify it if it's less than 70, because it's in your best.
Because it's more premium, right? But if it's more than 70, you're probably not going to specify it because no one cares about that. They just know it's lower quality. So if it's unspecified, but it's still 10% or less, they still call that futsu. And I think that's really just that the lower quality kind of piece can kind of depend on the semi buai or how much alcohol is in it.
Right.
Those are the two kind of vectors
You
you're
can't
thinking
cut
about.
both of the corners. You can cut
Right.
one of the two corners
Right.
and still kind of get away with it.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's our handy dandy cheat sheet. Hopefully that was helpful. That is in one of our articles, and I'll throw all the links to the articles in the chat in a moment. I think it's in the third article that's about, ordering sake and knowing your way around
How to
assessing bottles.
be a
And
pro.
yeah, how to go out for sushi with your friends, and you're the one at the table who's like, I got the sake list, hand it over here. Let me figure out what to order.
So while these cups sure are cute, they're not necessarily the best vessel for assessing aroma, flavors, but more so aroma.
Ochokos in general?
Anything with this lack of headspace,
But isn't this what they traditionally drink them out of in Japan?
they do, but I do think it's more cultural. It's because of the fact that since they're so small, you're constantly refilling them. As you continue to drink more, you are more and more likely to have it splash over into the mokari. And
Gotcha.
that's, a blessing each time that happens. And so if you are interested in kind of assessing the profiles of these sakes a little bit more readily, feel free to pour whatever you're drinking in a wine glass that has a little bit of a headspace or a bulb. We love these and we're going to continue drinking them out of this, but this isn't like a prescriptive glass. There are lots and lots of different glasses that they consume sake out of, they pour sake out of. Many of them are ritualistic and cultural, more so than they are meant to kind of deliver what that particular sake can and maybe will present in the precise glass that would define it.
Sure.
Yeah. But what do you think of this?
Don't down talk my cute little Etsy SipScout Ochokos.
Our Ochokos. These are so cute.
Yeah, I love them.
The diamond is meant to kind of be a really great introduction to this kind of refined edge at the line of sake, where the kind of fruit and floral components lend themselves to this type of sake, as opposed to any of the more like earthy, ricey characteristics that you can find in a sake that has less polish.
And some like pear notes.
And I was just gonna say, like, what do you guys smell and taste in this?
I'm jumping the gun. Yeah, throw in the chat. What are you guys smelling or?
And this is a really useful tool while you're looking, while you're tasting the sake, taking a look at this and just allowing that to be maybe a little bit of a suggestive guide. Whether you're smelling, I mean, I love the delineation there of sea air or mountain air, whether it's fresh, briny freshness.
Well, in Japan, that makes a lot of sense, right? There's a lot of ocean kind of front areas, obviously, and then mountainous as well. They have
piney freshness.
Yeah,
is the way they define the other one.
Yeah, you don't see air on many other tasting
aroma wheels. Yeah. On that note, I would say this one is a little bit more piney to me than it is having a saline quality that you might get with sea air.
I feel like with almost all sakes, I get a little like mushroomy, earthy kind of stuff going on.
What's the characteristic of the earth that you get in this one? I think mushroom is not.
I feel like I almost get like, I'm thinking of all of our mulch in our backyard. I almost get like the damp under, like kind of starting to decompose mulch a little bit.
Sure. Forest floor.
What are you doing to me? As these things are coming out of my mouth, I'm like, who am I? What is happening?
I definitely get a little bit of melon. Like Crenshaw melon.
It's interesting. So the words ginjo and daiginjo was it melon, pear,
Oh,
banana?
that's right. They literally
So
translate.
Ginjo, I think, translates to aromas of melon, pear, and banana, I believe it is.
That sounds like it's familiar. to me. Yeah.
And then Daiginjo translates to big aromas of melon, pear, and banana. So I feel like, you know, they
It
really
makes
feel
sense.
like those are aromas that are very prominent in sake.
And it does seem like those are pretty prominent on the sensory wheel. Tree fruits, well, there's a whole section on melon.
Oh, there is a whole section on melon.
Yeah.
It is so interesting. So you may be familiar with wine aroma wheels or whiskey aroma wheels. If you've been a SipScout member for a while, you've gotten a wine aroma wheel from us in the past. But it is interesting. A lot of people think like all aroma wheels are the same. And while you can certainly use any aroma wheel when you're tasting something, and there's going to be some things on there that you can find, they are very specific to the category of alcohol. You know, a whiskey aroma wheel
Yeah.
is much heavier in like tobaccos and, you know, leather and things of that nature.
100%. Things that come from the aging process.
Right.
Barrels with
Right.
whiskey, whereas something like sake that is, it does happen, but is rarely aged in oak or any kind of wood, isn't going to have a lot of those baking spices and those like deeper, lower toned
Yeah.
notes.
Yeah,
Yeah, I mean, in this wheel, is there anything in that
no, I
kind
don't
of
think so.
capacity?
Mm-mm. Yeah, it isn't
No.
air, melons, like the categories you don't even see in others. What's this yellow one?
Uh,
Berry fruit?
Oh, that's
Yeah, berry fruit.
Yeah,
I
berry
think it
fruit.
is. What do you guys think of this?
the melon
Yeah,
agreement there with melon. And I do feel like it is like a green melon, like
like a
Crenshaw,
honeydew.
not like watermelon. Yeah, honeydew.
Mm-hmm. Do you all drink sake very often? Do we have any sake experts in the mix or sake aficionados? Or is this anyone's first time drinking sake? Or it's been a really, really long time?
It's been since college and sake bomb.
I have to say, as much as I'm like, we're not doing sake bombs are fun. It's a
Sure,
fun experience.
sure.
I understand why people like them, you know?
You get to say Siggy, 40, 40, 40.
Oh, I don't know that.
And then you hit the table and then it drops into the glass, right? Isn't that right?
Yeah, I think you're right. I
You
do
put
remember the
a chopstick on either side of
and then
it.
you hit it and it falls
And it
into
was-
your.
Constant.
Now, don't go doing this at any old like sushi place or Japanese place. You gotta like, certain places are very amenable to this and they kind of encourage it. Whereas if you went to,
If you're within a mile of a university, go ahead.
yeah, probably. But I don't know that I'd go to our local sushi place and just like start banging on the table and
Sure.
splashing beer everywhere.
So I'm gonna pour a little bit of the next one.
Yeah,
And
let's do that.
If you have two glasses, which you all do because you got two in the package,
Yeah, maybe pour the other one all in one and then do a side by side.
trying these side by side is a pretty neat way to kind of understand two very similar styles, well, two sakes that are the same style, but with just a slight variation in the way that they were made. And variations in the way that sake can be made are inclusive of the type of yeast that you're going to use, the koji mold
Enzyme.
enzyme, that is chosen, how much of that is in the actual sake, or I'm sorry, actual rice when you start the fermentation process. Again, how quickly you ferment, which is a thing that is contingent on the temperature that you ferment. This is a great place to kind of rewind a little bit and talk about koji.
Yeah, yeah, because that is the one, you know, we're all familiar with water and some kind of a grain and a yeast to make different
kind
kinds
of-
of alcohol.
Any kind of sugar source.
Yeah, but koji is unique. It's an enzyme. It's a fungus, actually.
It is.
Yeah.
And the reason that sake exists, if you took rice and water and yeast and put them all in a bowl, nothing would happen. even if you cooked it.
Even if you cooked the rice or like cooked it all together, like, because that's how you make beer, right? You put grain and yeast and water and you cook it, and that heating up of the grain with the yeast is what allows fermentation to happen. Why wouldn't it happen with rice?
So with rice, the particular starch, the carbohydrate that rice is comprised of, in a grain like rye or wheat or barley, that heating turns that into an available sugar.
Glucose, kind of, right?
Yeah, and it's not quite glucose, it's a longer chain sugar that you find in different grains. But in rice, that doesn't happen. And so what koji does is it does that for us. It's essentially like the fourth stomach on a cow that allows for the sugars that are otherwise undigestible or non-fermentable to be broken down into something that the yeast can then ferment. And so it's a pretty remarkable circumstance of like nature finding its way into a place in human civilization that's been around since like BC 50. Like,
Yeah, I
there's
think
been
like 300 BC in
evidence
China and like 450 BC in Japan or something like that.
and
of,
it's
like,
not just like sake, it's
koji,
it's
right?
yeah, it's knowledge of this, like they know that they need that specific mold and they sprinkle the spores on it in order to be able to get this beverage.
Yeah.
Um,
And the way it's done is they cook the rice a little bit. They cook the rice so it's like just tender inside, but still hard on the outside. And then they sprinkle a bunch of this koji
kind of spread it out.
all over it, and they wrap it up in towels. And they kind of leave it, I think it's probably in a warmer environment.
I was suspect.
And they leave it for a couple of days,
Mhm.
I think, and let it kind of marry and meld and do its thing. And then when they unwrap it, that's when they put it into the fermenter.
Mhm.
And they sprinkle more fresh koji on that then, along with the yeast, along with the water. And the water is a very important point in sake as well.
Huge.
You know, they are very particular about the minerals and where the water is coming from. And a lot of them are using these mountain sources from Japan, these mountain springs for their water source as well. Yeah, and then they add more koji again, and then the yeast and the water, and that's when that whole long fermentation begins.
Yeah, the water component is just as critical as it is with like whiskey. You'll hear whiskey producers talk about the water sources that you find in places like Kentucky, which are notable for the low concentration of things like magnesium, iron, and manganese. The limestone substrata that exists there that water has to filter through pulls a lot of that stuff out of the water, and so the aquifers that they are pulling from to make bourbon whiskey are very low in these components, and what that does to the texture and the quality of the flavors that you find is admirable and sought after in the whiskey world, and places that are producing whiskey in a style that is meant to kind of represent or
Like, walk, if you will.
sure.
But it also, some whiskey producers particularly whiskey producers who bottle at a higher proof, knowing that their consumers are going to proof it down at home by themselves with water, with ice, things of that nature. Some, I think Macallan is one of them, right? Actually sell their source water in bottles for people to buy a bottle of whiskey and buy a bottle of the exact same water that was used to make that whiskey, so that when they're proofing it down, they're not tainting it with water out of their tap where they may have hard water or whatever the case may be.
And Japan is very much known for the quality of their water, and the regions in Japan that are notable for sake production, as well as wasabi production. Wasabi means
I would love to go to a
really,
wasabi farm.
really high quality water that has a certain kind of percentages of certain mineral components. But Fushimi, the area around Nagano, the foothills of Mount Fuji, all have natural springs that lend themselves to quality sake production. The foothills around Hiroshima. And what Momokawa has done is developed a sake brand that really kind of is meant to be reflective of the ideals behind sake production in Japan, but right here in the United States. And so Momokawa is based in Oregon in the Willamette Valley, which is very well known for wine, if any of you are a wine fan. And they source their rice both from California, a specific varietal called Cal Rose, as well as Arkansas.
Yeah.
Arkansas. And Arkansas is actually the only state in the United States that is growing a particular variety of rice that is specifically cultivated for sake production exclusively. Super cool that they are doing that at all in the United States, in my opinion.
Well, and their story is there was a brand called Momokawa in Japan, right?
Correct, there
And
still is.
Still is.
Yep.
And the guy who started Momokawa here, he was
Importing Momokawa.
importing
Yeah.
Momokawa from Japan. And then, yeah, because they had, if you look for Momokawa, you'll be directed to a website called SakéOne. And that is really an importer website. And so there's all different sakes on there from Japan that, you know, but
Some
they're
of which are imported and also some of which are made by SakéOne.
right. And this is their house brand, if you will, essentially. So this is, you know, their effort that they started to say, you know, rather than just importing sake, we know so much about sake. Our, you know, founder came from over there. He fell in love with the Momokawa in Japan. He really wanted to bring good sake here. Why don't we try to start making our own? And they're allowed to use the Momokawa label here on their brand in the United States.
Right, the imported version of Momokawa goes by a different name.
Yeah,
here
but in
the
Japan,
United
it would be called Momokawa, but here it's called something else.
Murai-san, I
That
think.
sounds familiar. Yeah.
Anyway, they've been making it here for I think almost 30 years.
They've been making Momokawa, like their own sake?
That's
for
my
30 years?
recollection,
Oh, wow,
yeah.
that's a long time, that's longer than I thought.
Yeah, the brewery was built in 97 and their first batch was produced in 98.
Yeah.
So yeah, 25 years, is that right?
Mhm.
Is that math right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Um,
But SakéOne's a great site to go ahead to and look at their sake collections and get other sakes delivered to you at home. And if you like these, of course, these as well.
we got distracted.
We did, well, this is that's that one, and
Yeah.
I did try them side by side.
Did any of the rest of you try these side by side?
And then
Because
you
I
thought,
do feel like if there's a notable standout aroma or flavor profile in the first one being melon, in my opinion, I feel like there's similarly one that is a notable standout aroma or flavor profile in the second one as well.
I'll wait until you taste it in July. Sure. I said earlier, what did I do this on earlier? I said something earlier about something. He's like, I haven't tasted it yet. You're biasing me. I was like, oh no, sorry. I already did it. You can go ahead.
Oh, you
Yeah.
already
I
did?
already
Well,
did that. Go ahead.
anyone in the audience have a feeling on what makes this one particularly notably different in terms of the aroma and the flavor?
I have something on the flavor. I don't have as much on the aroma. No,
I mean,
for
this
it.
is just me.
go for it.
Banana.
Oh, do you get banana in this one?
So much banana.
Fresh banana? Ripe banana?
Banana rice.
Rotten banana? Banana bread? This is what he does to me. I'm just getting him back.
No, thank you.
Yeah.
That's very valid.
Green banana?
I would
Plantain?
say it is more of a green banana. This
Oh,
is
green
unripe
banana.
banana
Okay.
to me.
Mhm. I felt like on the palate, that one is much like fresher and zippier to me. It just has like a liveliness to it that this one doesn't as much. And I'm
It's
not sure where
interesting
that
because-
comes from, but
Not no, but at the same time, the freshness is, I think, for my palate, balanced by it's incredibly ripe. The fact that I smell unripe banana compared to everything else that's going on there on the palate, this is a lot more full bodied. I feel like the acidity between the two is probably comparable. But I do feel like this is a lot rounder.
I do feel like this might be a little bit more acidic. It does have a little bit more of that like dancing in the back of my palate and
Mhm.
throat, you know?
So the production of organic sake, as opposed to the other two here, is primarily based on the addition or non-addition of sulfur dioxide. And
Oh,
sulfur dioxide is something that is used to inhibit and minimize bacterial growth in a lot of things. Pick up a bag of dried fruit at the grocery store, and it's been treated with sulfur dioxide. That way it dries instead of raw. The
Does it-
sulfur dioxide prevents the bacteria that causes it to rot.
this is a little fun fact that Evan likes to like poke people with, because a lot of people with wine will say, I'm allergic to sulfides. I'm allergic to sulfides. They give me a headache. I can't eat sulfite, you know? And he'll kind of be like, do you ever eat dried apricots or dried fruit in general? And they're like, oh yeah, I love dried fruit. I eat dried fruit all the time. And he's like, then you're not allergic to sulfides, because there's like more sulfides in like 3 dried apricots than in like a whole bottle of wine. Like it's such a small amount. So there's a lot of misperceptions out there about what's happening with people when they feel like they're allergic to wine. A lot of times it's just because they're drinking too much wine without drinking enough water.
And histamine.
Yeah,
Which,
histamine.
fortunately, comparatively, sake doesn't have nearly as much histamine. Histamines are found in every plant, but it's primarily found in the leaves and in the fruit. And while,
Not
yes,
in the skin
in the skins of
of
the
the fruit.
fruit.
Okay.
And while, yes, if you want to be technical about it, the grain, the rice
It's grown.
is the fruit. But when you're milling it,
You're getting rid of the
that's the
outside.
skin
Yeah.
of the fruit.
And
And
that's
so
where red wine creates that perception
Tends to
problem
have-
with people more, because there's more skin contact
precisely.
in the wine. And so it's really more of an allergic reaction, just like you have allergies, you know, when there's a lot of allergens in the air. If you happen to be really allergic to the types of allergens that were in the air in Napa during that season, and that's in that wine, then yeah, that wine's gonna bother you a little bit more. But that made me think of something else as it relates to, oh, the interesting thing about sake is it's open fermentation. So it's open tank
Oh, yeah.
fermentation. So speaking of like
Great point.
histamines and, so beer does this, wine does this, and a lot, you know, what this does. So when you do open air fermentation, what that essentially means is your fermentation tank does not have a lid on it. So it's open to the air. And there's a lot of benefits to this, and a lot of natural winemakers certainly do this because there's native yeasts that are available, like just circulating in the air. There's yeast all around us all the time, right? And so if you're doing open fermentation, you're basically allowing a little bit of a lack of control, a little bit of like whatever these yeasts are in this environment, that's what's going to help ferment my juice and turn it into the alcohol. And it's interesting because with sake, they have very tight controls on the rice, the milling, the koji, the water. I mean, if you know anything about Japanese culture, it's a very perfectionist culture, right? And for good reason. They make beautiful things. They have very high attention to detail. So the idea of native yeast in your sake
Terrifying.
is just like, that doesn't make sense for sake. So when you first hear that, you're like, wait, they're so like precise and controlling about everything else, but then they have open air fermentation. And the reason they do open air fermentation is because it is a colder fermentation. And so that temperature is so critical, because since it's colder, if it drops too low, it will completely kill the yeast or like make it go dormant essentially and stop the fermentation process. And then that whole batch is just.
And at the same time, since heat is an output and a byproduct of fermentation,
You want
if
to let
it's
that out.
contained, yeah, exactly. And it, not only is it a byproduct, it's also a catalyst.
Right.
So if you're trapping it, you're going to increase the fermentation.
Right.
And that's
Not what they
exactly
wanna
not
do.
what you want.
So the way they control this, because they are controlling every level of the process, because it's a really an art sake making, like I mean, we feel like all brewing and distilling, when you're doing it right, is an art, but
And the science,
it
like
is.
it's the melding of the two.
Yeah, but the art form of this, I feel like, is to a different degree, partially because of the Japanese culture. So the way they manage this, like, we need to have the tank open, but we don't want native yeast. Like, we don't want to have like an uncontrollable yeast in there that we're not familiar with what it is they are just very, very precise with their cleanliness practices. Like, like no one can go in the fermentation room without putting a hairnet on, without taking their shoes off and putting different shoes on, without wearing gloves, without doing all this, to the point that even, in Japanese culture, fermented foods are very common, right? Fermented soybeans, fermented, things like this, that they actually, most sake breweries ban like a very popular fermented soybean dish from like employees eating that
Off the clock.
Right, you
You
can't eat
can't.
it while you're at work.
It doesn't matter where you are.
Because they're so worried that the yeast
Gonna-
that fermented
Gonna
that
sit on your
soybean
shoulder and
is gonna make it
follow
into their
you in.
sake. So it's fascinating. It's a real
It's
interesting
not dissimilar to the way breweries that
sour beer.
do, Brettanomyces,
Yeah,
Saison beers, they will have two separate brewery
Breweries.
locations
Yeah. Wicked
Uh,
Weed is the best example of this.
because they don't want cross-contamination of the yeast.
Yeah. Is there anyone familiar with Wicked Weed down in North Carolina? They were bought out 5 years ago or so they're no longer craft, unfortunately. But Wicked Weed had two breweries like 3 blocks away from each other. And it was simply because Wicked Weed made a lot of sour beers, and Brettanomyces, that yeast that they use for sour beers, just is rampant. It's kind of like a weed, like
If
it
it's
jumps
in the
to
air, it
everything,
gets
it
in the
goes to
thing.
everything. So it would make your ales and your lagers and your stouts and everything else sour if you're not careful.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good point. That's very similar.
But yeah, I mean, you wash your hands at the brewery, at the sake brewery, but you don't just wash your hands. You then have them dunked in alcohol.
Oh, yeah, they
for
always
10
make,
seconds,
right,
and you hold them on, like,
right.
the level, it's almost like,
It's almost like-
operating room.
Yeah, I was gonna say, it's almost like an operating room. Yeah, for sure. So we try the third one. This third one's a little different. I tend to be a fan of, here we go, spare glass here.
Well, before you open this, I would say, do this,
Mhm.
maybe do it again, maybe do it a third time.
So this is a Nagori sake,
Yeah, Nagore,
still
Nagori.
considered Junmai Ginjo.
Mhm.
But Nagori means essentially lightly filtered. It often is talked about, I did this earlier today, I said unfiltered, and Evan fixed me.
No, I didn't do that.
No, you reminded me, but it's commonly referred to in the States as unfiltered sake. And that's an easy way to think of it. Do we have a wine glass? We can just pour a little bit of it into a wine glass. Because it is very lightly filtered. So when the sake is kind of getting close to ready, what they do is they put it in burlap bags, essentially, burlap bags, and stack those bags on top of each other and then put a press on top of it. And they slowly press it through that burlap in order to filter it, essentially. And so with these Nagori sakes, so you can see how cloudy this is, with the Nagori sakes, it's a much looser weave on that burlap bag, so that a lot more of the esters and the oils are kind of getting into the final product. And it's
This
pretty significant.
is essentially cheesecloth, or maybe even a tighter grain or coarser, tighter weave. And this is very coarse. This
Yeah.
is like a burlap sack.
Yeah. So it lets a lot more through. And this is common, wine, there's unfiltered or lightly filtered wines as well that look cloudier in the glass. Hefeweizen is a great example of a beer that kind of is a similar approach. So yeah, it's common across alcohol categories, but Nagori is what, isn't there a species called Nagori? No, I'm thinking of, what's the N? I always confuse them. What are the rolls called?
So there's sashimi, which is
Yeah.
just the fish, and then there's sushi, which is on rice. Technically, sushi translates to on rice.
Yeah.
What are you thinking?
I feel like the rolls are, there's something called like, and when I was refreshing my memory on some of this stuff earlier, I was like, Nagori, I was like, isn't that also a sushi term? Like, why? Just do Nagori sushi, look up Nagori sushi.
Sure, doing it.
So I tend to really like unfiltered, lightly filtered sakes. I like the mouthfeel. I like the body that they have. And I like the flavor. I also really tend to like funkier wines, sour beers, Spanish ciders, right? Things that just have a little bit more personality, if you will. No, am I making stuff up?
Is it, perhaps nigiri?
Nigiri, that's what it is. I am mixing it up. Yes, nigiri. Thank you.
Nigiri.
Nigiri.
Yeah, that was a funny thing to learn, to have come to light, is that the term sushi literally just means on rice. It doesn't imply fish at all.
Right, it can be anything on rice. That's so good. I don't love what it does to the wine glass when you're drinking it, because it leaves kind of like a milky trail behind, but makes your glass look kind of
Looks
dirty and
beautiful.
gross. But I do really
But
like that
a
flavor,
valuable comparison
Yeah.
of
for sure.
what that lack of fine filtration does.
Yeah. Do we have any favorites from those of you who are drinking through all three? What do you think of the Nigori?
So this is stupid because I know why I'm saying it, but I'm gonna say it anyhow. This reminds me of coconut.
Do you think it's the visual? That's
It's a
like,
visual thing, it's a textural thing, like this is coconut water that is, but it's not, no, there's some of that kind of nutty characteristic, which makes sense because the more of the rice character that is there, that is passed through the coarse filtration, the more similar that grain characteristic shows up, which is not dissimilar to nuttiness
yeah,
in any grain, like wheat, barley,
it does have a
corn.
nuttiness, and I like that nuttiness.
and that's also, yeah, I mean, that's also coconut. But I do feel like, and that's why I prefaced it by saying like, this is stupid. Because it tastes like what it looks like. It looks like coconut water and it kind of tastes like coconut water. Is coconut one of the descriptors on there?
I don't know, it's
Tropical?
fresh sweet corn.
Mmm,
I'm just noticing other things.
from Hauser Farms.
Mhm, mhm.
Now that you say that, I kind of smell fresh sweet corn, uncooked, right off the cob. Actually, while you're shucking it, like it smells almost like,
Yeah. I'm gonna get a little piece of dark chocolate because I noticed in there, the SakéOne guide, it suggested this with dark chocolate for the food pairing.
well, hot diggity.
What other food pairings do you think with sake in general?
I feel like there's the dummy answers, which are any kind of raw fish.
Yeah.
But I do feel like there are some elements of sake with the fresh kind of bright floral components, that melon and that pear, the tropical elements that you find in banana, that could lend itself to a lot of dishes that would be on the spicier side,
Mm-hmm,
in my opinion.
mm-hmm,
And kind of quelling the
Sure.
spice that you would find
sure.
in those dishes, because a lot of times that, well, the weight and the texture as well as that fruitiness, would lend itself very well. Thank you.
Mhm. Yeah, I thought when I was looking at their pairings dressings, I was like, chocolate with sake. Never thought of. And so we've talked about this before, if you've been with us before. When you're pairing food and wine or any beverage, try the drink first. Then try the food by itself. Then take a bite of the food, partially chew it, get it started in your mouth. Then take a sip while the food's still in your mouth and finish chewing the food with a little bit of the liquid in there with it. And that's really how you pair food and you assess if it's a good pairing. And what you're looking for is a great pairing is when you take a bite and you have the sip and they're both in your mouth at the same time. It's like, ooh, like just like, you know, the skies are opening and the golden rays are coming down. That's a
Angel
great
specific.
pairing. And it happens, honestly, like if you start to pair this way, you will find these things where you're like, oh man, I don't want to eat this alone and I don't want to drink this alone anymore. That's a great pairing. A good pairing is when one of them is better. Or they're both good, you know, and then a bad pairing is when it makes one or both of them worse, where you're just kind of like, I don't want to have those together. And that's fine. When that happens, then you just go back to taking a bite, eating it and swallowing it and drinking the thing afterwards.
So in your SipScout report, there are some pairing suggestions. And
Okay.
as soon as you mentioned, I was like, wait a minute.
I've already done this exercise.
And the suggestion with this is a nice, moist, spongy angel food cake with pineapple gastrique
Oh,
and olive oil.
fancy. If you, just in case you have a little angel food cake with some pineapple gastrique and olive oil laying around.
But and thinking about that, like the complement of
Pineapple.
the tropical fruit characteristic of
Yeah.
the pineapple, the gastrique and the vinegar as something kind of like keeps the dessert from being sweeter
Mhm.
than what you're pairing it with.
That's the tip with desserts and pairings. You always want the
If
drink
you
to be sweeter than the dessert.
if you're eating anything sweet, you want whatever you're drinking that you're pairing with it to be sweeter. And while this isn't overtly sweet, there is some sweetness to it.
And this chocolate is 70% cacao, so it's pretty bitter. So this does work pretty well. together,
And
I have
then
to
the
say.
olive oil component with the gastrique, again, kind of mellowing that, but also giving it a little bit of like an herbaceousness
Mhm.
and grassy earthiness. Yeah, I like that idea.
Mhm. We have
Let's go
pineapple.
get some angel food cake.
All right. There we go.
I also suggested grilled meats and spicy marinade.
Yeah.
That kind of follows through with the idea of like spice.
You still agree with your suggestions? That's great.
Hey, all right.
You're a smart guy. You're a smart guy.
No, my work here is done.
All right, I feel like we've rambled on long enough and have hopefully educated and entertained you guys for a little while here about sake. So we are going to promote people to panelists. If you'd like to turn your camera on, tell us what you're thinking, unmute yourself, kind of hang out with us. If you don't want to, that's okay.
It's okay.
You're allowed to just still hang out and listen in on the party. And
I'm gonna keep reading through my pairing and serving suggestions.
remind yourself of what you wrote a month ago. And if no one wants to
That's a good idea.
promote the panelists, then we can just let everyone enjoy their evening. How do I do this? There we go.
Oh, yeah, a confit of a dense fish like wahoo or swordfish.
All right, so you'll get a little pop-up on your screen that says
I'm totally into that.
promote panelists, and you can just accept it if you want to, and you can decline it if you don't want to.
Yeah, that was a good call too.
I love you.
Where's the organic?
Hi, Zach. Hi, Bob.
With each.
Hey there.
How you doing?
Missing my better half this month. So
Aw, this
to-
whole month.
no, just tonight.
Oh,
Night shift.
I'm like, where'd she go?
This month's,
Yeah, yeah.
so I'm not partaking. I'm saving it, especially since you mentioned at the top, like, oh, this isn't going to keep. And I was like, yeah, I got to work tomorrow. I can't drink 3 bottles of sake by myself. That's a bad
Yeah.
idea.
And that's very thoughtful for you to hold on to that, and you can sit down and watch through this with her whenever she returns.
Or you can just tell her everything you learned and be the smart guy.
There you go.
Now,
Finger up to the side. Isn't that
Zach, we have a joke for you, but we can't tell you until next week or next month.
Oh, no. All right. Well, that just means I have to be there.
Because it's a rum related joke. And I think you're gonna appreciate it, and particularly you. And so I'm just gonna leave it at that.
Okay.
Anticipation, we're building it.
Yeah. I was like, oh, Zach's there this month. We have to tell him the joke. And I was like, wait, no, next month it will be even funnier.
All right. Well, now I have a month to think about that.
That's right. That's right. Yeah. See if you can figure out what the joke is. That'd be hilarious.
Figure out the joke before we ask you or
That's
tell you.
amazing.
That would
Seven
Damn.
for those.
Hi, Bob. Hi, Kristen.
Hi.
Hello.
Everyone, this is
You want to see what we found?
Oh, you did find some sake. Yes, Arizona sake.
Whoa.
Great.
So-
We've had that before. Remember, we had that at a restaurant down in Phoenix.
So this is made in Holbrook. What kind of water do you think they have in Holbrook?
Arizona.
So that's a great question, but if they have water in Holbrook, it's probably from a local spring, right?
I don't know, or a deep well.
Yeah, with arsenic in it.
Well, that's encouraging.
Enjoy. No, I'm sure
It was
it's
quite good and
Yeah.
we still are kind of
Yeah,
lucid.
we taste the melon and the bread and
cool.
We really did taste that. That was
missed out
neat.
on the coconut.
Yeah.
No, but that visual was fabulous.
The coconut is definitely a lot more prevalent, I feel like, on the Nigori.
Sure.
Yeah.
We do have another one, but we figure we're gonna save it with you. What's the other one?
And yeah, yeah, it's interesting. You were saying, you were joking, we're still kind of lucid. Sake is a funny kind of little drunk. You have a funny little clip about like, it's like a tequila happy drunk, but
No, it's not
No.
tequila house.
what is it? What do you really say it is?
So I've equated the buzz that you get from consuming sake to somewhere that is the mid-ground between wine and tequila. And
Wine
the
and what?
wine
And
and
tequila.
tequila. And the wine portion of it, for me, is a very like convivial, conversational, friendly, lovey, embracing type of buzz.
Okay.
And tequila is maybe let's go flip over a car. So,
Oh
like,
my goodness.
intersection of like those two, I feel like is where sake kind of exists for me. Like let's turn it over but gently and then like take a picture of it and put it on Instagram.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah, I can believe that.
yeah, that's wonderful. That's a really great.
So like a little bit of like punchy, like overly fun aggressiveness of tequila, with that like exploratory convivialness of wine. I don't know. It's weird to think that the same, chemical compound, ethanol, through its various delivery mechanisms, might cause people to respond in drastically different ways.
Yeah. Because you do hear that about
Awesome.
different alcohols,
Sure.
like, some people like, oh, I can't drink tequila the way I get drunk on that, or I can't drink red wine, or, yeah.
Yeah.
Beer or Jägermeister.
Wait, I don't know if this is gonna, yeah, this one. I think.
Oh,
So this is a picture right, of Evan in Japan. I know. With sake, and this is kind of a funny story. So he went to Japan, when was that?
2018.
That
Oh,
is
wow,
a
not 19, not 2 years ago.
Oh,
Yeah,
this is
so
Evan right here. Is Evan on the left hand?
I don't have gray hair.
Oh, okay, you're across from him.
Yeah, he's
thought that-
across from him, yeah.
Yeah.
I thought he was passed out.
So, yeah, we went to this, sake bar tasting space. In
What city in Japan?
Fukushima, just south of Kyoto, which is, I would say, one of the top 3 places for sake production with regard to the desirability of the water quality that you find there due to the natural springs and the aquifers. And the tasting experience was absurd. Not mildly absurd, it was absurd. It was 40, like it was literally like 4 by 10, this giant thing that they brought out and put
All at once?
in front of all 4 of us.
Okay, so 40 to share between 4.
No.
Oh,
we
40
each-
each?
We each had our own. We
Were
had no idea what we were
Were
doing.
they like these?
'cause- Yeah,
Were they full?
there was this much of that for all 40 of us.
Full?
Yep.
Oh
We
my
didn't
God.
finish it, but
Yeah.
that's how much was presented to us. And we went through and we did like check plus, check minus, check, kind of like gauging how much of each one of them we liked. There was a few that ended up being check minus, check plus, plus. And then stupidly, we wrote down the phonetic pronunciation of each one of the ones that we liked instead of the Japanese kanji. And then
Yeah.
we went to the nearby sake store that they
Joint.
told us to go to buy the things that we liked, because they didn't have a package license there. And instead of being able to just simply show them the kanji that says like, I want this one, we had to say, Dimbai Kudo no,
And they were like, we don't know what the hell you're talking about.
Yeah.
Lapulaptanda. And like try to convey the phonetic translation of the kanji that we just stupidly didn't write down. We took a picture of the English phonetic translation, but they couldn't read it, of course. And so that picture is me using Google Translate to try to say it in Japanese so that it will show up with the kanji so that he can look at it and then go into the store and find the bottle and get it.
Did you actually get any bottles?
Yeah,
Oh, you did.
I got like 6. It took 2 hours.
Your friends are patient.
They were so mad.
Oh, were they?
They were so mad. Steve was laughing his ass off and taking pictures of me. And I was like, you guys are gonna regret not getting bottles yourself. They didn't. 'Cause I-
That is really, that is quite a story.
That was a gift to Evan from Steve. He framed it and like got it because he's like, you're a ridiculous human being. You need to have this photo. Yeah.
Oh, my.
Well, and then on the opposite end of the spectrum is the thing that's behind me here, this guy.
Beautiful.
This came home with you from Japan too.
Your story.
And
That's
this was
beautiful.
completely filled with sake and came with a little spigot that you kind of put on there.
Yep.
And
It was the worst sake I've ever had.
well, to be fair, so you brought it home in
It
like
was
2018.
like $7.
Yeah, it was like $7. He brought it home in 2018.
And worth it.
And one of the reasons he bought it is because he went there on a ski trip and this fit perfectly in his helmet. So he was like, great, empty space of the helmet, this fits right in it, I can bring it home, done. You know, and so he brings this home, and then I think it sat on our wine fridge as like, this is a display piece for like 2 years, 3 years maybe.
Yeah.
And we just kind of forgot that there was actually sake inside of it. And so one night, Steve and his girlfriend came over and we were like, you know what? We should probably open this. You were there with him. This has been here forever. Let's open this. So by then it's 2 years old. It's low quality sake to begin with.
It's been sitting on the top of a hot wine fridge.
And it was one of those things that we're like pouring it and drinking it and all trying to like convince each other, like, oh, good. I think that's interesting. Like, it's, you know, we're all trying to like convince
Interesting.
and finally we're like, all right,
Interesting.
you can't drink them.
Covers a
Interesting.
lot of ground when you say interesting.
Yeah,
Yep.
yeah.
That covers a lot of ground.
Yeah, I think you get a haircut and your girlfriend is like, oh, that's an interesting haircut. And you're like, yeah.
All right, maybe 40 was an exaggeration, but
Oh, it does look like a lot.
let me share this
Show that
picture with you so that you can.
Yeah, can you imagine, like, you guys are responsible, so like, you're not gonna finish all of them, but can you imagine how many Americans go in there and are just like, stop, 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 and drink all of them and walk out of there wasted?
100%.
Like, so irresponsible.
All right. see if you
What do
can-
they do with the ones that aren't finished? Does the staff drink them? Do they pour them in tomorrow's collection?
Where'd you send it?
You know, I can't imagine that they don't just pour it out.
Yeah.
I don't know what any kind of responsible, like,
Reputable.
Right, but what a waste.
Yeah.
not know. So Suzanne is finding this picture of the sake, the throw up here. So you can see. Yeah, sidebar. If y'all haven't been to Japan, go to Japan. Like, it's the first time I've ever traveled someplace that upon returning, I'm gonna back that up. The first time I traveled somewhere that I knew I would return after going there was Italy. I'm definitely going back.
Where?
Italy.
Italy.
Me too.
And, I feel like that was kind of a novel thing for me to experience. 'Cause in traveling, I had just kind of have this mindset of a checklist. It's like, okay, done, did it. And then Italy was like, no, I'm going back. I'm going back to Italy. And then when I came home from Japan, I was like, I would go back next. I would go back tomorrow. I would get off this plane and then get on a plane and go back right away.
Wow.
And that was similarly revelatory.
It's like Bob.
Okay. Oh, it's should have been shared.
Yeah, I know that's weird people.
Yeah, I mean, haven't gotten the chance to go there. It sounds amazing. Everyone keeps talking about it, and I think one of the biggest sells was Anthony Bourdain's Parts Unknown. Now it's mostly just based around Tokyo, but that is an excellent episode of television.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
He made a lot of excellent episodes.
He did.
That fair point.
I think that was the only time that a celebrity death has actually caused me to cry.
When the day that we found out he died, we actually went and got ramen because we were like, Anthony Bourdain would want us to go eat some ramen. We're gonna go eat some ramen, and he's on it. Like we did a thing because he died, guys, which is rare.
Yeah, I was a little bit.
I cried for Whitney Houston too.
That's right. Yeah, I was a little bit like astounded with David Bowie, but I just love his music to like a crazy degree. But the way that Anthony Bourdain talked about food and drink, made me feel like we were in good spirit.
It may be. We saw the one in Colombia where he fell off of his quad.
I remember that one.
Oh my God, what a horror show.
And the fact that he tried to make Colombian foods sound like it was tasty was really completely shocking that he could imagine
It was
that food.
180 degrees from our experience.
Well, you needed to follow his recommendations, apparently.
Yeah,
No.
we didn't fall off the quad.
No,
Yeah.
and but the food looked exactly the same. I have to tell you. What do we call it? It was all decompressed. What's it called?
Deconstructed.
Yeah, all the food was what we call deconstructed.
Sure.
Like the soup, well, it was all big chunks of things, and you had to
Floating in it.
yeah, you had to take care of everything yourself. You need a paring knife, a sword. So we went to Italian restaurants whenever we could.
Oh, yeah, that's a great idea. Yeah, it is interesting how some of the countries, I feel like Central America and South America in general are a little like
Garbage.
lots of potatoes and beans and like, it's fine, but there's not a lot of like interesting, unique cultural kind of dishes.
True. Only Mexico.
Yeah. Argentina's pretty phenomenal, but again, it's like steak and like potatoes and nothing all that.
Eat steak and potatoes,
Yeah.
It's not very
but not
original.
every day.
It's not
Right.
original.
Right, I mean, it's delicious steak and I'm convinced that they keep all their good Malbec for themselves and like. just
Oh,
extra
interesting.
crap. Yeah, and it's like $10 a bottle for like amazing Malbec there. And like, there's good Malbec here, but there it's like life-changing. It's so good. Yeah, I want to go back to Argentina.
That sounds like some of the wines in Italy then.
Yeah. Oh, hold on. I got it.
That was pretty neat to hear that you could get right back on the plane to go to Japan. Wow,
Yeah, it was.
that's neat because
That was a really neat thing. Like, we landed in the international terminal at SFO, and I was like, is there a flight departing for Japan soon?
He says that, but he still hasn't brought me there, so I don't know what happened.
You have to earn a living.
Snowboarding?
I don't want to go snowboarding. I want to go eating and drinking and exploring.
I'll allow it.
But I also haven't taken the Spain yet.
So I think that has to be first. You talked about it. Talked about the cat.
Yeah.
How do I hear?
Or you panelist?
Oh, that's fine.
Do you snowboard over there?
That's why we went. Oh my gosh, Jack. Do
Oh,
you ski or snowboard?
ski. I'm originally Southern, so like I've only recently discovered this. And so sidebar, my first time like getting back into skiing, because I did it when I was a Boy Scout and then never did it again because my dad didn't like it. And then tried it again like 2000. No, the next time I went skiing was 2020 February. I was like, I'm going to do this. I'm going to get an end of year pass on my local mountain. COVID. And then I did it again this past winter in 2022 and found out I had to have knee surgery for something completely unrelated. So I've not had the best of luck, but I am trying so hard to get out on mountains more.
What mountains are you going to? Because you're out in my neck of the woods, right?
Yeah. Loon and Wachusett, mostly Wachusett.
Yeah, what you said is pretty well known.
Easy to get to, not crazy hard. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a weird thing. When I was younger, like I went skiing a few times when I was kind of young, but then like, I don't know, it's an expensive sport and my parents didn't ski. And so they weren't really, and so they were just like, so I never really got into it. And then I did the same thing, like in my like early 30s, I went a couple of times, Big Bear out here in California. But then at that point I was like tall and like didn't want to get hurt.
It hurt.
And, like,
Now it hurts.
Right.
and I was like, I feel like this is a sport you need to learn when you're younger and fearless, and then you can really enjoy it. But it's harder to like get into when you're older. And there's just a lot of equipment and a lot of like finding money and it's a lot.
Sounds like a pain.
But I do enjoy it. We go cross country skiing here in Arizona. Actually, they take us up to there's a mountain, and it's so weird because it will be like, 65 down here, and we'll go up to the top of the mountain and go cross country skiing, and it's fun.
Nice.
All right. I have the ability to share now.
All right, show us some thoughts. Show us some Japan pictures.
You have to learn to ski when you can still bounce.
Yeah.
Yeah, and when you're a little closer to the ground.
Yeah. When you fall and you're only a foot and a half off the ground,
Yeah, if you twist your knee, it's not gonna like tear a ligament. It's just gonna like spring back.
no big deal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Open, share window. Yes, that one. Is,
Going to Japan.
all right. So that's kind of like sake. Each one of us,
So not 40, but a lot.
yeah, what is that? 3 by 8, so 18.
That's crazy.
That's enough.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah, 40, 18, what the hell?
Yeah, same.
I mean, it feels
Magnitude of order,
like,
right?
it feels like 40 when they put that down in front of you.
Yeah, it looks like it. That's my
And
recollection
those are
of it.
pretty big glasses, and they are full to the
They
top.
are very much full to
They
the
are
top.
full.
And that's actually a fun tie-in to this. Wait, no, wrong one.
Oh, but that picture I love.
Yeah, I'll talk about that in a second. These are the Mokati, where,
You were talking about earlier.
abundance overflowing, and you can just drink right out of the
Out of the
box that
box.
it's served in.
That's
and
what
then-
he said he did.
This
Yeah.
This is quite fun. What this is so where we went skiing, we're in the mountains around Nagano, where the Olympics were in 1998. And there's a lot of natural hot springs there, which is really nice after a long day of skiing to go and sit in the Japanese onsen or hot spring, like what do you call that? Yeah, spa. And this is essentially right outside,
Kind of like a 7-Eleven, right? Like,
Yeah.
Like, it's a little like.
precisely,
convenience store.
a little convenience store, and out in front of it, there's this hot water bath, and these are called eggs.
Like,
soft-boiled egg, soft-boiled seed perfection. And then there's some salt and vinegar chili oil above it. And
Oh
you
my
just put
God.
50 yen into the little thing up here on the top. And
that's a canister for your
and you
shells.
can see the shells there. And you just, and then you just scarf that down as you're walking down the street.
It's like my dream. I like eggs are one of my favorite foods. And like I would say, if I was stranded on the deserted island and I could only bring one food, it would be an egg, because like I can like make eggs into a million things. I'm like, oh my God, there's a hot spring soft boiled egg, like that I can just walk by and not even interact with anyone and just like grab it and eat it. Some thing.
Oh,
I want that.
This is just a small collection of thousands and thousands of gallons of sake that were concentrated after Emperor Meji's death.
Filled with sake.
Filled with sake, consecrated after his death. Yep,
Gifts or kind of,
funeral pyre, if you will. Similar,
is that where this comes from?
no, I didn't go into it. Similarly, he did this with a lot of, so Emperor Meiji was one of the emperors that had a really strong connection to the Western world. And these are all barrels of wine, exceedingly crazy expensive barrels of Montrachet and Vos Romani,
Like all the wine.
individual bottles from this barrel that contains roughly 600 cases, no, maybe 300 cases, 12 bottles per case. $5,000 a bottle, $4,000 a bottle.
whoa.
Forever and no one's gonna drink
No one's ever gonna drink those
Why?
because they were consecrated in his honor. And he was instrumental in connecting Japan to the Western world specifically during his time, and bringing the best of those worlds that Japan had really not been connected to into their culture there. And then Japan did what Japan does, which is take everything that they come in contact with and make it better.
Make it better, yeah.
Are those even proper storage conditions, or they gonna throw in the line?
They're out in the middle of the park.
So even if like 20 years from now, some of them is made like this, it's kind of crap.
Yeah, like this one right here. Clos de Lambre, Grand Cru, Moët Saint-Denis. An individual bottle of that at release, probably $800. And in 10 years, 4,000.
And at what point is it not drinkable?
I mean, these are all not drinkable now.
How long?
Emperor Meiji was like, I think he passed away in like the 1950s.
Okay, so they've been doing that for a while already.
Out in the outdoors. This is all outside. What else is really fun there? Oh, the snow monkeys.
Oh, yes, I remember
Oh,
this.
these are, yeah.
These guys were,
That was amazing.
Is this on Hokkaido?
yeah, outside Hokkaido.
Yeah.
They were like in the hot springs, right?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, they are
Hot
stupid.
springs. But are they in the same hot spring that you're going into?
Oh, God, no.
Okay.
Oh, God, no, why?
Like, I wish that would be awesome, but also kind of terrifying.
Yeah.
They probably run your ass right out of there.
Oh, yeah. They
How do
definitely.
you keep them out of your hot spring?
Yeah, how do you keep them out of the hot spring you're in? Are those all indoors?
No, they're not indoors, but they're also not. They're in a town. And so like the hot spring is bubbling up and then they just like capture it in pools
Gotcha.
that are like,
And they're not.
I wasn't allowed to take pictures there because you're all naked.
Fair.
All right, so if you want to go skiing, look at this expansiveness.
Wow.
So the ski conditions there were as follows. We would wake up every morning and there would have been somewhere in the neighborhood of 2 to 3 inches of fresh snow, baby blue skies, no wind, and you'd just go out there and stomp and romp through champagne powder. And then
Ugh.
around 2 to 3 p.m., right around the time you're getting tired, they would, you would see the crowd rolling in and you'd go home, and then they would do it all over again. And there was nobody on the mountain. The tickets were like $50, $40. And the outfitter that we went with left us at lunchtime to go scout the surrounding resorts to see where we'd want to go the next day.
Wow.
Unbelievable.
So it's not really a popular skiing destination.
I don't know why.
Yeah.
Makes no sense.
Yeah.
No, that looks wonderful. And I mean, being over here in East Coast, Ice Coast, I have no idea what champagne powder really even is. I know it is.
Yeah, East Coast snow and skiing is notoriously icy.
I had a problem one time where I actually got super lucky. We had like a crazy snowstorm the day before, not really the night before, so it wasn't completely fresh, but I went a little bit to the side of the trail by accident because I was skiing a little bit above my level, and one of my skis hit, I don't know if it was champagne powder, but it was light, fluffy, pretty much untouched.
Wow.
And immediately the first thing that popped into my head was that dial tone, and when you can't reach someone, the do do do, because I was like, that foot isn't there anymore. I'm gonna have to compensate. I didn't fall somehow, but it was definitely like, I've never felt that before. I didn't know what that was like. And then having one ski on kind of packed powder versus loose was a bit of a trip. Ooh, that didn't look good though.
So I went off piste following one of my compatriots, and I did that to his arm with my snowboard.
Oh,
Whoops.
Look at
Dangerous.
that. Oh, no. That's what it did like every
So this
afternoon, right?
was right as we were leaving.
wow.
You were
Yes,
saying, like, every afternoon it rolled in and like dumped new snow, right?
Right, and then every morning, it would
Be like that.
look like this.
Wow.
With that much snow built up on everything.
That's
It was
crazy.
bonkers. It was, yeah. Anyway, I'm
Wonderful.
gonna stop submitting you all to my
Making us all want to go to Japan.
my memories,
Making us all.
because now I want to go to Japan myself.
Well, we haven't done an international trip since COVID. It's about that time.
It would be funny if my first international trip after COVID was my last international trip before COVID.
You know, it was Vietnam.
Oh, that's true.
Exactly. Yeah.
Let's do another little cheers and say, I don't know, what's au revoir? In
You don't know how to say goodbye? You were in Japan.
I don't know how to, like, just because I was there doesn't mean I know how to speak the language.
Isn't it like, hello, goodbye, please, excuse me, where's the bathroom?
I only know,
Aren't those
cheers.
the key
I
words
only know cheers.
to learn? Evan's like, all that I need to know is cheers. I don't need to know where the bathroom is in any language.
All right. Oyasumi is good night. So kampai and oyasumi.
Hi, oyasumi. And enjoy your sake when you open it up.
Will
Let us-
do.
Thank
Let us-
you.
Let us know what you think and let us know which one's your favorite.
And also, doi takimashite oji-san.
Doi tashimaste. I think it means like good morning or something.
Yeah, I feel like you
Because-
said something
Because
like that.
thank you is something like domo erogato gozaimasu.
So, yeah, and
And
domo.
Ojo-san is honorable daughter.
Oh, that's right. So
It
it
is
was
honorable
something
daughter.
about her.
I like it. Well, cheers, everyone. Thank you for joining us for another lovely SipScout party. We hope you enjoyed your kit. Next month is rum and cocktails.
Oh,
Because
that's
it's
right.
summertime, and what's summertime without some rum and
And I believe
some
August is
tropical
rum month, right?
cocktails? Yeah, August is rum month. Well, July 31st is Black Hot Day.
That's what it is.
Yeah, we'll talk all about that. But yeah, next month is a fun one. We're excited for that one. We're making one of my favorite cocktails as part of the party. So we'll see you then. We'll be in our tropical gear then. We'll have a beach party.
Thank you.
Cheers, everyone. Good night.
Good night.